We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Little Tuesday night edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. I'll say this, for late July, sure does seem like we got a lot to talk about. Loaded show. Here is what you need to know about this Tuesday night. We're going to open multiple coaches on Tuesday afternoon calling out the SEC. Are they right? Are they wrong? Is the SEC overrated? We're going to discuss all that. From there, we will talk about dueling reports on Kentucky athletics. One report says they are going to spend a crap ton of money on basketball, maybe at the expense of football. There is a different report that says otherwise. What is the truth? We're going to discuss that. And then from there, we will wrap Nico Iamaleava. His father is back in the news. And when I tell you it ain't good news, I promise you it ain't good news. By the way, Jason Hodges says, what's up, Aaron? What's up? We got a lot to talk about, Jason. So before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. You know, I'll be transparent. Super happy with the quality of content that we have been able to put out over the course of the last couple months. Everybody else is slowing down here in the summer. We have not missed a beat, so thank you for your support. If you are not subscribed, please make sure to do so. If you're watching live, click the little like button so that we can get this live stream trending. Besides that, also make sure to rate and review the pod. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. You can find us on Apple and Spotify if you're not watching the pod. With that said, it is late July. A lot of stuff going on. No more time to waste. So let's get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day. Listen, bottom line, we call it in college sports and college football talking season. And why it's called talking season is because right now we have all these media days going on, all sorts of stuff going on, and of course, all sorts of things being said, I should say. And all the conferences are basically underway. A few weeks ago, we had the Big 12. Last week was the SEC. And on Tuesday, both the ACC and the Big 10 started their media days. And when I tell you that even though the SEC wasn't on stage, they were the center of conversation, there were a lot of people with a lot to say about the state of SEC football that do not play or coach or live in SEC country. So 2 different coaches on Tuesday afternoon called out the SEC and basically said, they ain't as good as they make themselves out to be. Let's get into each of them. First of all, ACC Media Days. Rhett Lashley, he is the head coach at SMU. Remember, SMU got the final at-large bid last year into the first ever 12-team college football playoff over Alabama, among others. Was talking about the SEC, was talking about a few different things. Here is what he had to say about the SEC. Quote, he said, the SEC has had the same 6 schools win the championship since 1964. Not a single one has been different since 1964. That's top heavy to me. That's not depth. So basically, Rhett Lashley saying everybody talks about SEC depth. In the last 61 years, we have had 6 different teams win the SEC. By the way, I looked it up. I could not believe that stat. It is true. Since 1964, only Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, LSU, Auburn have won the SEC. So I want to get to that quote in a minute. But right when I was done swallowing and digesting what Rhett Lashley had to say, then I turned on Big Ten Media Day, and Curt Cignetti, never afraid to share his opinion. Remember, Indiana made the college football playoff last year. And remember, Indiana was a very controversial selection. They had canceled a game against Louisville in the out-of-conference. They played no one of note in the out-of-conference. And so instead played 3 cupcakes into the Big Ten schedule where they did play 9 games. The SEC only plays 8 league games. And Cignetti asked about his scheduling philosophy, which, by the way, included another canceled game this year against Virginia. Signetti was asked about it. Here is what he had to say. Quote, where we get our scheduling philosophy from? We figured we'd adopt an SEC scheduling philosophy. So listen, we're going to get into each of those quotes, but to me, what this speaks to is the SEC still atop the sport of college football? Yeah, I actually kind of think they sort of are, but at the same time, nobody's afraid of them, and nobody wants to hear any sort of propaganda. So let's go ahead and dive into each of those quotes, and I'll try to be quick. First of all, I'll say this. The Lashley quote I just referenced, I found it very interesting. I don't really know that like it means all that much. Again, 6 teams in the last 61 years have won the SEC. He's saying it's not about depth. I didn't know depth was only about the team that won the league, right? I thought depth was team 3, team 5, team 7, team 10, team whatever. So I don't really know how much I even agree with that quote. I will say this about the Cignetti quote, though, which is interesting. His insinuation basically being, hey, we figured we'd adopt an SEC scheduling philosophy, play nobody in the out-of-conference, but we play 9 league games. The SEC only plays 8. And so this to me is an important note, an important distinction where I think a lot of the frustration comes from. Cignetti saying, wait a second now, you're telling us we didn't play anybody. Well, guess what? We played 9 power conference teams last year. That is the same as Texas, who got an at-large bid. Nobody complained about them getting in. 8 league games, plus they played Michigan. By the way, Indiana also played Michigan. Both teams beat Michigan. Cignetti saying, we played 9 league games. That is the same number of power conference teams as Alabama, who we got in over. Alabama played 8 SEC games and 1 out-of-conference game at Wisconsin. Cignetti saying, we played 9 power conference teams. That's the same as Ole Miss, who we got in over. Same as South Carolina, who we got in over. So stop whining about our schedule. Look in the mirror. Acknowledge that the SEC plays FCS teams, They play group of 5 teams late in the schedule, but they also only play 8 league games. And until everybody gets on a balanced schedule, I ain't going to sit here and apologize for what we're doing. Also, Cignetti just kind of likes to talk that smack. I was thinking about this. Is there any coach in America that both the entire SEC and Ohio State kind of hate more than Cignetti? Of course, Cignetti with those comments last year about screw Ohio State, screw Purdue, screw this team, screw that team, whatever. Anyway, so those were the quotes. And this is what I kind of want to talk about from here. To me, I don't think it's really a conversation today about which league is the best, right? That gets settled on the field. But what I do think it is a conversation about is 2 different things. Is one, I think for the first time in a while, there is some genuine debate. I think there are reasons that you can argue against the SEC, but I think more than anything, these other conferences are sitting there saying, you've shoved your propaganda down our throats for 20 plus years. And for part of that time, it might have been true. We ain't buying it anymore. We ain't putting up with it anymore. And you got to acknowledge that we play pretty good football as well, okay? As far as the first part is concerned, I think it is important to note, like the SEC, listen, I think I try to be fair in this. I try to be balanced in this. You go back to last year, I argued that SMU should be in over Alabama based on the criteria that the committee had. I argued Indiana should be in. It's not pro or anti-SEC. It's what is the criteria? What is the argument? What is the reasoning? And last year, the committee said nothing that happens on championship weekend is going to impact the teams that are in. So SMU was in before they played Clemson in the ACC championship game, okay? But the bottom line is, what I do think is indisputable is things are going in the wrong direction for the SEC. We know that the last 2 years, the national champion has come out of the Big Ten. Michigan 2 seasons ago. Ohio State last year. Oh, by the way, the SEC hasn't even played for a national championship in each of the last 2 years. Michigan beat Washington. Of course, last year, Ohio State beat Notre Dame. It's worth noting, by the way, I went and looked at the national championship odds for this season. Of the top 6 teams, there's 3 in the Big Ten, 2 in the SEC. Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon in the Big Ten. In the SEC, it's Georgia and Texas, and Clemson is in that short conversation as well. So I just bring it up because the facts actually back up that at least at the top, the Big Ten has caught up. And I think to the point that both of these coaches have made, I don't think that this is the important part, I think. The benefit of the doubt doesn't just automatically go to the SEC anymore, right? Because I think for 10 or 15 years, for the bottom line is the benefit of the doubt did go to the SEC, and I think justifiably so. What was it, about 12, 13 years in a row, they won a national championship. You start with, I guess it wasn't 12 or 13, but it was about 8 or 9. You start with Florida against Ohio State in 2006. It goes through, sorry, producer Matt, but Florida State beating Auburn in, what was it, 2013, 2014, somewhere like that. So, and by the way, even after that, Alabama won multiple national championships. LSU won a title. You go on and on down the list. I think the benefit of the doubt was deserved. I don't know that it is anymore. One, the results on the field say that the Big Ten has caught up at the top. Two, I do think it is worth noting that the SEC plays one fewer league game. And I don't want to get into the whole dynamics of the expanded college football playoff, but it seems as though the Big Ten is very much going to draw a line in the sand about their beliefs about expanding to 16 teams. It sounds like unless the SEC is willing to expand to 9 league games, they're not sitting here and rearranging the college football playoff for the SEC. Finally, let me say this is I do think it speaks to a broader thing that we've talked about on this show that I think everybody who loves college sports, cares about college sports, talks about college sports has to acknowledge. The SEC might still be the best top to bottom. I know Rhett Lashley had the depth conversation. I would argue it's still the deepest conference in college football. But the counter to that I would say is pretty straightforward, is that while it might still be the deepest, it does feel like the Big Ten has caught up. It does feel like the benefit of the doubt is gone. And it does feel like for the first time in 20 years that some of the dynamics in college football are favoring other teams in other conferences plus Notre Dame. Listen, we talked about this in the college football playoff last year. For 20 years, the SEC had a monopoly on not only the best talent, but retaining the best talent, right? And so you start to go back. Why was the SEC so dominant? One, an all-time great coach, but two, let's call a spade a spade. Most of the best high school football talent is located in the SEC footprint, in Florida, in Georgia, in Texas, in Louisiana. Well, back in the day when all of those guys would commit and then have to stay in a program because there was no such thing as the transfer portal, the SEC was great because they had more good players in their backyard. They had to stay. They didn't transfer. Now the sport has changed. You look across college football, it's crazy as we start our prep work, the amount of talent and how much it's spread out. And how much it's spread out, frankly, in a lot of cases to the Big Ten. Penn State, their best cornerback, former 5-star, A.J. Harris, began his career at Georgia. That's a dude that 10 years ago couldn't have left Georgia, wouldn't be at Penn State. Michigan, who's their best running back? Justice Haynes was the backup running back last year at Alabama. Now, I'm not saying he would have been like a star at Alabama, but what I am saying is if there's an injury, if somebody twists an ankle, whatever, that's the guy that's going in. Now he's not at Alabama. So the talent is more spread out. And then I think what's indisputable is, listen, I think some of the conversation about, well, now everybody can pay players. Yeah, I think that's a little bit hyperbolic and a little bit silly. But the counter to that is, it's also sort of true as well. And not only is it true, but on top of that, the Big Ten schools in many ways are better positioned to raise crazy amounts of money. And I know we're going to this rev share conversation, but I understand that we're in theory going to put a cap on how much teams can spend. One, I don't believe that will be the case. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But two, I bring it up because the Big Ten schools have bigger alumni bases and, frankly, more money. And it's just a simple, to quote my buddy JJ Redick, it's a math equation, F-head. Why is that? It's because when Penn State has literally 3 times as many alums as Alabama does, living alums across the world, guess what happens? That's 3 times as many boosters in theory that are willing to pay to help in NIL. Michigan has a massive alumni base. Ohio State, Wisconsin, you go on and on down the list. As a matter of fact, just for fun, I went and looked it up. According to alumbase.com/blog/largest alumni associations, here are the top 10 largest alumni associations in the world. Penn State at close to 800,000 living alums. Indiana University, kind of surprisingly, at 775. Michigan at number 3. Ohio State at number 4. The first SEC school makes the list. That's the University of Texas. Then it's UC Berkeley. Then it's Michigan State. Then it's Texas A&M. Then it's Harvard and Stanford. Well, I bring that up. Not great at math, but I just listed off a bunch of schools. What was there? 6 Big Ten schools in there? Indiana, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State. I think that's 5. 2 in the SEC. And they're the 2 schools that we all agree spend the most money. Texas and Texas A&M. And so I just bring it up because, listen, the game has changed. The dynamics have changed. Money talks. And right now, the Big Ten, I think, is spending more money than just about anybody. Bryce Underwood is not the quarterback at Michigan if it isn't for money. He's played at LSU this year. Again, think about Ohio State, a $20 million roster last year, which we believe was the highest in college football. Now, it's not to say that teams in the SEC can't compete, specifically Texas and Texas A&M. Did you see where Texas A&M is going to spend $51 million between 24 and 25 in terms of their rosters? It's just to say that the dynamics have changed. And like I said, I don't think the SEC just gets the benefit of the doubt because they're the SEC anymore. I don't. And I certainly don't think they get the benefit of the doubt when they're playing one fewer league game. So this is going to be, I think it's an interesting conversation, but I think it's a broader conversation that we have to have because as we get into the season and as we get into college football playoff expansion conversations, it sounds like the Big Ten is drawing a line in the sand. If you're not going to add a league game, SEC, we don't want to hear your complaints. We don't want to hear your whining. And again, I think this is a metaphor for, I think a lot of people have kind of sucked it up and dealt with the propaganda. I don't think anybody's dealing with that propaganda anymore. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. First of all, we love the chat. Very lively chat to start the show. We appreciate you. Producer Matt, you can see if there's any interesting questions. I'll check them as well. This is what we're going to do. We're going to come back because we are talking about, all sorts of things as it pertains to college sports in this new age that we're entering. Well, I'll tell you what, certainly an interesting story and really 2 different reports on Monday. One saying that Kentucky is about to blow everyone out of the water in terms of basketball spending. Then there's one that says it's not really true. I think it leads to an interesting conversation about what's going on at Kentucky, but also where is money being spent at different schools? How much is realistic at certain places? And are you going to have to sacrifice one sport for the other in this new era of college sports? We're going to take a quick break, come back, discuss that. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, I have so many people that reach out and say, Torres, you give me hours and hours and hours of free content every day, every month, every year. What can I do to help support the show? Well, you want to support the show and look good in the process. Make sure to check out and support the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Some of you wondering, what can I get in that merch store, Torres? Well, Kentucky fans, we got our Mark Pope Hope and Pope t-shirts. That is right. Mark Pope, monster first year. Year 2 is going to be even better. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirt at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is coming. It is here. John Calipari has things rocking. Get your Big Pig Invasion tees. Again, aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. St. John's fans, we have our Big Rick Energy t-shirts. And if you're just a college basketball fan in general, guess what? Your March is for Day Drinking shirt. That is the shirt that you need year-round, but especially for the next NCAA tournament. You can order yours now. By the way, football fans, we got you covered too. Auburn fans, we already know the freeze warning has hit the plains. Make sure to get your freeze warning t-shirts. Also, Nebraska fans, new era, new rules, the t-shirt that you need before the start of this coming season. And oh, by the way, if you're a Colorado fan, if you're just a Coach Prime fan, we have our Dion shirts and hats, more of them than we know what to do with. So to check out the full line of Aaron Torres Media merch and also support the show, good news is we're going to have even more for the fall. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And for more information, you can always reach out at Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody, I'm back. Good to be back. So tell you what, Do want to keep the conversation going. But before we get to the next conversation and what is a busy day in sports, it is time to shout out our friends. It is time to shout out our partners. It is time to shout out the snack that you need this summer. It's time to talk Cauli Puffs. Okay, so I've told you all about Cauli Puffs, but first of all, Cauli Puffs is a podcast sponsor, a podcast partner of ours. We love working with Cauli Puffs. And for people who are new to the show, this is the healthy alternative to the crap, the disgusting filth in your grocery aisle, right? It's that time of year. You don't want to be looking like a big filthy slob, sitting at the beach, sitting at the pool, sitting by the whatever, walking around your neighborhood with your shirt off. I don't know what you do in your free time, okay? So you need a snack that is healthy but delicious. You need Cauli Puffs, okay? Family-owned company, not far from where I live. Joey, the founder, is a huge sports fan. I talk to him all the time. He actually loves all the reels that producer Matt puts together, follows on Instagram, all that. But basically, he was sitting on the couch one day and said, I need to stop looking like a filthy slob. I need a snack that I'm going to like, that my kids are going to like, that my wife is going to like. So he came up with Cauli Puffs. Again, healthy alternative to the crap in your grocery aisle. Baked, not fried. Avocado oil, no grease. Healthy ingredients. Here's the best part, though. These things taste freaking delicious, okay? At this point, you don't need to take my word for it. You can try them out for yourself. So many of you have. We appreciate your support. And if you have not tried them yet, this is what you need to do. You need to go to CauliPuffs.com. That's CauliPuffs.com, CauliPuffs.com, and just get what you want. Buy whatever, buy one bag, buy 50. But if you use promo code Torres, you get 15% off your first purchase. Or not your first, but all your purchases. You can go buy Cauli Puffs every day. As a matter of fact, you probably should. But buy one bag, buy 10 bags, buy twice a week, buy once a week, whatever it is. When you use promo code Torres at checkout, you get 15% off. Help Cauli Puffs. Help support the Aaron Torres pod. Help yourself. Eat healthy. Try Cauli Puffs. With that said, let's switch gears. And I'll tell you this, very interesting conversation that came out on Monday, okay? So on Monday's Aaron Torres pod, we really recorded Sunday night, but we talked about the fact that it was the end of kind of this college basketball recruiting cycle. This past weekend, it was Peach Jam, it was Adidas, the event that I was at. And I'll be transparent. The number one conversation that at the event that I had with coaches and people in basketball was what the heck is going on with NIL and what the heck is going on with rev share and what does it mean for the future of college basketball. So remember, we now live in a rev share world. What does that mean? What it means is that now, instead of boosters and collectives paying players, every school now has $20.5 million to spend on whatever they want, pay their athletes, okay? Once you get past the $20.5 million, then players can still sign NIL deals, but those are the ones that have to be approved. Those are the ones that have to go through a clearinghouse. Those are the ones that you have to make sure get approved, basically, for lack of a better term. So you can spend the $20.5 million however you want. Every school can spend up to $20 million, but after that, you have to prove it's real NIL. Deals are getting denied. And I think the big question, just in the bigger picture, is anyone actually going to stick to the $20.5 million, right? Because we know that, good college basketball rosters this year, this past cycle, were costing $8, $10, $12, $15 million. North Carolina, we know, paid $14 million for their basketball roster. And football rosters ballooned up to $30 and $40 million this year. But you're supposed to stick to $20.5 million. And I think what's interesting about that number is that I think we all kind of thought that basically everybody was going to be kind of operating under the same kind of principles, right? You have $20.5 million to spend. Virtually every school that has major college football, so basically the Power 4, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC, going to spend probably about 75 to 80% on football. That comes out to about 15, 16 million a year. Probably about 15 to 20% on basketball, so 2.5, 3 million. And then whatever's left over goes to women's basketball, goes to baseball, whatever. That was the assumption anyway. About 75% for football, about 15% for basketball, on and on. At least that was the assumption until Tuesday, or until Monday, really. That was because Matt Norlander from CBS, he was at Peach Jam, and he did kind of a big just conversation about where college sports are, whatever. But there certainly was an interesting part of his article where he said Kentucky is not going to be paying the 15% or so of their rev share to basketball, but instead closer to 45%. Producer Matt, you could put up the quote from the article. This is, and it has to do with the Big East, some of the non-football schools being able to spend more than everybody else. But Matt's article said the consternation stems, from most SEC teams operating below $3 million in revenue sharing for the upcoming year, according to a variety of sources. One expected exception is basketball-crazed Kentucky, which is believed to be at 45% rev share of its $20.5 million cap for 2025-2026. There was talk of all SEC programs agreeing to an equal rev share cap, but similar to the Big East, if Kentucky wants to put more emphasis on its basketball program and sacrifice for less than the football side, more so than the likes of Alabama, Auburn, or Tennessee, that's Kentucky's prerogative, okay? And so for people who don't totally follow that, basically, let me even backtrack. The SEC, when we got this rev share, when we got this dollar amount of 20.5, Greg Sankey kind of came in and kind of tried to push for everybody to spend equally in every sport, create as much balance in theory as you can. So everyone's got to spend this much in football, this much in men's basketball, whatever. It was well reported and well known at the time that Kentucky was the number one school and maybe even the only school that pushed back and said, wait a second now, we're happy to spend the 20.5, but why do we have to spend it all on football? Why can't, if we want to go higher in basketball, why can't we? And so Norlander reported on Monday that Kentucky is going to spend 45% of its rev share money on basketball. I'm just doing some quick back of the envelope math. That's about 3 times as much as basically any other power conference school that I'm aware of. But it would also, of course, put the football team at a significant disadvantage, assuming, of course, that everybody sticks to the $20.5 million. This is where it gets interesting. Matt Jones. If you follow Kentucky sports, you know who Matt Jones is. Kentucky Sports Radio. Frankly, he used to be my boss. I did some stuff for KSR back in the day. Upon seeing this report, Matt Jones on Monday night put out a tweet that refuted Norlander's report, saying, quote, I am told that the report today about basketball getting significantly more NIL at Kentucky than other schools is not true to the degree stated. I am told the football folks feel the rev share level for UK football is very competitive with the rest of the SEC. So essentially, we have two very differing thoughts on what rev share is going to look like at Kentucky. Matt Norlander, CBS, says they're going to spend upwards of 45%, and they're going to be not even close in basketball in a positive way, but not even close in a negative way in football. Matt Jones says football is going to be basically the same as everybody else. Kentucky basketball might get a little bit more, but not the same. To which I say, and I think this is where it gets interesting, which report should we believe? That Kentucky's going to spend way more or Kentucky's going to spend the same? So I have a thought on this. I think I know what happened. And let me start by saying this. I know both Matt Norlander and Matt Jones. Okay, this is not a criticism of either of them. I don't think either of them is purposefully being deceptive. In other words, I don't think Matt Norlander pulled that number out of the air. And I don't think Matt Jones is just completely making something up to refute that Matt Norlander report. But what I would say is, if I had to believe one over the other, I'm just going to say it. And if it gets me in trouble, and if it gets me banned from, well, I don't know where it would get me banned from, but I got to say this. I do kind of think the CBS Sports Matt Norlander article probably is a little bit closer to the truth. Not a criticism of Matt Jones, but I think all you got to do is think about it from a few different perspectives. Think about it from Norlander's perspective. Okay, first of all, Norlander's a great reporter. Not to say Matt Jones isn't. Norlander's a great reporter, okay? But there is, beyond him being a good reporter or not, one, he's just not going to throw something out there. Two, there's no benefit to him. There's no benefit to him just throwing that out there willy-nilly with no truth behind it. Like, you could say, well, Kentucky's the biggest college basketball program in America. There are way cooler stories to make up about Kentucky basketball if you want to go viral than that one. So I don't think he's just making it up out of thin air. Now, maybe some of it is other schools trying to say, oh, Kentucky's got more than us, it's not fair, blah, 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 blah. But I just don't think he would make that up. Now, I don't think Matt Jones would make his up either, but I think we also agree that, like, look, it benefits Matt and it benefits everyone at Kentucky if that news is not out there, because while it probably does help the perception of Kentucky basketball, I think in some ways it actually hurts, because now it's like, oh, we have so much money to spend. Obviously, recruits are going to ask for more. Obviously, now publicly the pressure goes up. But you know what it really does? It really hurts Kentucky football. And that's, to me, where I think the Matt Jones tweet, it feels to me like it's a little bit of a code red, press the button. We got to get ahead of this story, because while it's positive for basketball, it's completely negative for football. And I do wonder if somebody in the Kentucky athletic department, maybe it was Mitch Barnhart, the AD, maybe it was somebody else. I do wonder if they saw that report and they were like, oh crap, we cannot have that out there. Now, what somebody would say, why wouldn't you want that out there? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It is because there's not there. Let me put it this way. There is a not 0% chance that Kentucky is going to have to hire a football coach in the next 6 months. Okay. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I know what Mark Stoops' situation is. I know his buyout is insane. Okay. But we know that Mark Stoops is coming off the most disappointing year of his entire regime, basically since year 3 or so when he got it going. So we know Mark Stoops is kind of in it this year. He's coming off a disappointing year. They were picked to finish 15th in the preseason poll last week by the media. This is obviously a 2, 3, 4 year downward, not 4, but 2, 3 year downward trajectory for Kentucky football. And I know that everyone's going to point to Mark Stoops' buyout, say he's not being fired after this year. I'm just sitting here saying, like, if Mark Stoops really bottoms out again, if he goes 1-7 in SEC play, if they go 3-9 or 4-8, I don't think he's back in 2026. I just don't. And you could say, well, the money, the this, the that. One, Kentucky will figure out a way to either buy him out or come to a settlement. But even from the Mark Stoops perspective, are you going to want to stay? I don't care how much money you're making. If you're miserable and nobody wants you there and everybody needs a fresh start, you think you're going to stay? I don't care how much money you're making. You know what's a great analogy of this? John Calipari. After that Oakland game, it was clear he could not stay there. It was clear there was nothing he could do to win back, and I think justifiably win back the fan base. It was time for him to move on. He finds a landing spot at Kentucky, and if Mark Stoops goes 3-9 or 4-8 again this year like he did last year, I don't think he's back. So to bring it back to the reports, of course Kentucky doesn't want it out there that they might be spending 3x on basketball and significantly less on football, because they might have to hire a football coach in December or January or maybe even November. And what they can't have is going into a coaching search, coaches saying, well, wait a second now, I'm going to be getting way less money than Josh Heupel and way less money than Kalen DeBoer and way less money than Billy Napier at Florida. And you want me to compete with and beat those guys and Shane Beamer and whoever, Brian Kelly? No coach that has options is going to take the job if they're at a disadvantage. And I'll tell you this, talking to people in college sports right now, the number one thing that is going to go into all of these negotiations whenever you hire a new football or basketball coach is, what percentage of the rev share am I going to get at the new job? And if you are getting significantly less than everybody else, there's no chance you're taking that job. Just as a hypothetical, I think every Kentucky fan listening or watching or whatever, John Summerall, the Tulane coach, right? That's the guy that everybody wants to replace Mark Stoops one day. If John Summerall knows that he is going to be at a significant disadvantage as everybody else, and that basically he has no chance of competing for the players that he needs to beat Tennessee and Florida and whoever, you think he's taking that job? I don't. To quote Kevin McAllister in Home Alone, I don't think so. He's not. And so to me, that's where the second report came out. And it's, to me, why I think Kentucky had to run a code red really hard. Now, it's worth noting a couple things because I think this is important. One, it is worth noting that, and I think this is important, is that rev share kind of dollar amounts, at least as things currently are, they can change year to year. So in theory, you could give basketball 45% next year. And then if you have to hire a new football coach, and if rev share is part of the conversation, you could bump it up for the following year. So if John Summerall is available, you could say, look, man, we're going to give you a long-term contract. This year, you're kind of behind the 8 ball, but year 2, 3, 4, 5, it's written into your contract that you get this percentage. So I'm not saying that even if the Norlander report is 100% accurate, that it means that it's going to stay that way forever, okay? But what I do think it speaks to is a very interesting conversation that we have to have about the state of college sports, where things are and where things are going, not only at Kentucky, but I think this is a metaphor for pretty much all of college sports. And what is that metaphor? It is that as we get deeper into this rev share era, as we get deeper into the pay for play era, whatever it looks like, whether it's coming straight from schools, boosters are involved, whatever, I just don't know that everybody can be great at every sport the way that in some cases they once were, right? And it was funny. I remember having this conversation about 2.5, 3 weeks ago with my buddy Ryan Fowler, who hosts Tide 100.9 in Tuscaloosa. And basically, if you follow Alabama, you've heard the stories. Alabama doesn't have these never-ending revenue streams of a Texas, of an Ohio State, of whatever. And so Ryan was saying, like, one, we struggled to raise NIL for football. But two, the sport that actually suffered was basketball, because basketball was not spending anywhere near, or at least at the time. Now, I don't know if it changed when LeBaron Philon came back, whatever, but they weren't spending anywhere near what Kentucky spent, what Arkansas spent, what some of these other schools spent on their basketball rosters, because they just don't have the rich alumni base that's just going to write blank checks. You know, Texas and Texas A&M spent a ton of money on their basketball rosters because they had new coaches this year. So Ryan was like, listen, I love Nate Oates. I hope he's here forever, but I don't know that we can be great in basketball and football simultaneously in this new era. And so I think those are decisions that all of these schools are going to have to make. It's not just Kentucky. It's not just Alabama. I was thinking about this, like Mississippi State, right? They're great at baseball. They've been great at baseball historically. Are they gonna maybe say, you know what, basketball just isn't as important here? We got to focus on putting the best baseball roster on the field that we can. LSU is a baseball school. Alabama's a softball school. Does some of the money go there? The only point I'm trying to make is I think every school is going to have to make tough decisions, and I don't know that everyone can be great at everything if, again, we stick to this $20.5 million cap. Now, the one thing I will say that is positive, and I was thinking about this, and we'll wrap on this, is that we talked Tyron Stokes the other day, number one high school player in America. By the way, make sure you're following our Torres on UK Twitter page, Torres on UK. But I bring it up because I'll say this. If Kentucky does have $9 million to spend on its roster for next year, they're probably getting Tyron Stokes, right? Because we talked about out of Peach Jam, it felt like all the intel and all the buzz was that Tyron Stokes was going to be a Kentucky, or not that he's going to be, that Kentucky was the favorite coming out of Peach Jam. And a lot of people say, oh, they're not the favorite. Louisville's the favorite, whatever. I want to bring it up. If Louisville's spending $15 million on football and $2.5 million on basketball, and Kentucky's spending $9 million on basketball, then all of a sudden, pick the player. AJ DeBonsa got a ton of money from BYU. Nate Amen a ton of money from Tennessee. We thought the days of giving freshmen all that money are over. Kentucky's got $9 million to spend. They're probably getting Tyron Stokes. So, we'll see what happens with this. But I think there's probably some truth to the fact that basketball is getting significantly more than most SEC schools. I think Mitch Barnhart has to run some PR stuff here to make sure that, hey, man, like I might have a football coach to hire and I can't have them thinking that they're operating at with 33% less money than everybody else. And then finally, I just think this is the new world of college sports where I don't know if everyone can be great at every sport at every time. All right, this is a fun show, man. This is what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to stay in the SEC because Nico Iamaleava, more importantly, Nico Iamaleava's dad, back in the news for all the wrong reasons. Quick break. Be right back.
What's up, everybody? It's AT, and listen, I've said it a million times. This podcasting game, it ain't for everybody. It's tiring. It's exhausting. Long days, late nights, and sometimes, I got to be honest, you look like a filthy slob when the day is over. Thankfully, that's where my friends Fiobot came in. They just sent me some of their summer line. Let's check it out. Look at me now. Listen, this is the perfect summer attire. We got the short sleeves. It's perfect for podcasting. It's perfect for the beach. It's perfect for the pool. And I just look good. On top of this beautiful linen shirt, we also have the Stay Cool 2.0. Perfect for those hot summer days. Keeps you cool. You can wear it at night. You can wear it during the day. You can wear it again to the beach or pool. So listen, if you want to look as cool and as hip as Torres, this is what I need you to do. Go to Fiobot.com. That's F-I-O-B-O-C, Fiobot.com. And also on top of that, how about this? Listeners of the Aaron Torres Pod get 20% off your purchase when you use promo code Torres. Promo code Torres, Fiobot.com. Appreciate their support.
All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Good to be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. Before we get to the final topic, I see a couple interesting things in the chat. First of all, Andrew says, quote, UK should find a way to keep their Club Blue Collective revenue under the table. I will tell you this, Andrew, and I'm being serious. At the Adidas event, I talked to coaches in the Big 12, SEC, whatever. This is the number one topic in college basketball right now, in really college sports, is anyone actually going to stick to the $20.5 million revenue? Because just think about it at its most basic level, okay? The numbers obviously got inflated this year. At the same time, I had an assistant coach in the SEC. It wasn't Kentucky, to be clear. Tell me this when I was at the Adidas event. He's like, if you want us to really stick to $2.5 million, $3 million, he said, you know what that means? That means that, everyone on my roster is going to have to take a 75% pay cut next year. Because again, most of the best rosters in college basketball this year, somewhere in the 8, 10, 12, even higher range. Now you're telling coaches they got to stay within a cap of $2.5 million. He said, it's not going to happen. And it's not, and by the way, I don't know why it should happen. If your best player is, pick a school. If Nate Amen isn't a one and done at Tennessee and he's making $2 million this year, but he's still really good, why should he have to take $200,000 to stay at Tennessee? By the way, like a DJ Wagner. DJ Wagner's probably making 7 figures. If you only have $2.5 million, if he wants to come back for a senior year, we're supposed to kick him out. And so, by the way, this actually frustrates me. And I might be in the minority in this. And I understand that we just can't be spending reckless money in perpetuity, but I don't understand why we're trying to put a cap on how much these players can earn, because what was the overwhelming sentiment of this year around the NBA draft deadline and really the NFL draft as well? Think about all the great players who came back to college because there's more money to be made in college than being a pro. Football last year, Will Howard would have gone pro, made more money at Ohio State. Same with Riley Leonard at Notre Dame. In basketball, think about all the guys that came back: Tahad Pettiford, LeBaron Philon, Otega Owe. I mean, pick a player. DJ Wagner, Carter Knox. I mean, Carter Knox could have gone pro, been a second-round pick, maybe a late first-rounder. But he's coming back to Arkansas to make a lot more money, and that's good for Arkansas, and it's good for him. He can continue towards his degree. He can get better and leave for the NBA when he's ready. Same with Otega Owe. Same with Yaxel Lendenberg. Same with LeBaron Philon. Same with Todd Pettiford. So I think it's stupid that we're even capping it. But Andrew, you are not. I'll tell you what. There's a lot of college basketball coaches that agree with you. We're going to get the money to these kids one way or the other, and that's the reality of where we are. By the way, coaches are always going to find ways to get money to players. We talked about Jason Crow Jr. last week. Now I don't know if he would have gone somewhere other than Missouri, but what I do know is the reports are Missouri is going to hire his dad as their head as an assistant coach. And it is because they can no longer just pay Jason Crow Jr. what he's worth. They have to find another way to get him money. Now, I will say the counter to this is all that there's only so much money you can kind of funnel to players without somebody finding out. I had one coach say that to me. He's like, dude, Torres, I mean, it sounds good, just pay players, whatever. And he's like, back in the day, you could get a kid $5,000, $10,000, whatever. It's like you try to sneak $1 million under the table to a kid because it doesn't fit in the rev share money. You're going to jail for that. So maybe it all does balance itself out. But I'll be honest, it's not my money. I do kind of just think it's stupid that we're putting a cap on how much these players can earn. Producer Matt, I know you have a couple others pinned. Let's see if there's anything of note that we should discuss here really quick. Kentucky Football Nation says it's not 45%. If it was, Mark Stoops would have spoken out. UK never agreed to the 15-3 ratio. Matt Jones is correct. Okay, Kentucky Football Nation. Listen, Mark Stoops is going to what is Mark Stoops going to say? Mark Stoops is owed, what, $40 million in buyout money? Like, I'm sorry. What's he going to say? Feel bad for me? How about you win some games? Because I know how much Kentucky raised for Mark Stoops in NIL last year, and it was a lot of money, and he didn't spend it wisely, or he didn't get the most out of his players. So what's he going to do? Complain publicly? He's done that enough. He's gotten crucified every time he's done it. I actually don't think Kentucky fans, I don't want to speak for Kentucky fans, I don't think most of them would have been sympathetic. Remember last offseason he was whining about raising NIL money? 2 years ago he said pony up. he's not going to speak publicly on it. Mark Pope's the most popular man on Kentucky's campus right now. You're going to try to go against Mark Pope? I'm sorry. I don't buy that Matt Norlander is just pulling stuff out of thin air. Now, is it 45%? Maybe that is not totally accurate, but is it, my guess, significantly more than any other team in the SEC in basketball? I think that it is. Really quickly, Matt, we got time for one more. Darren Reuter says, bring back the McDonald's bags. Shout out to Jeremy Pruitt. I'll tell you what, producer Matt, what a segue into the final topic of the show, where we revisit what was certainly a very interesting story in the spring in college football. And to be clear, it came full circle over the last couple of days. Okay. So obviously spring, April, we were focused mostly on college football, college basketball transfer portal on this show, but there was a college football story that absolutely swept all of college football. And that was the Nico Iamaleava drama. Okay. You don't need me to tell you, we don't need to relitigate it. We don't need to relive it, but we know about 2 days before the transfer portal opened, 2 days before the Tennessee spring game, Pete Nakos from On3 has this report that Nico Iamaleava, his father, his quote-unquote camp, are basically trying to leverage the transfer portal to get him more money at Tennessee. We don't know what's true. We don't know what's not. Some people defended Nico until the next day when he did not show up to practice, and it was very clear that that was exactly what was happening. Full circle, it becomes clear, it becomes untenable. Nico ends up entering the transfer portal. I thought the whole situation was played terribly by Nico's side of things. He ends up in a worse situation for less money than if he had just stayed at Tennessee. I think Josh Heupel did absolutely everything right, okay? So that was what we thought we knew as of April. Nico, of course, now at UCLA. Well, I bring it up because we got maybe a little bit of a different version of events, stuff that was maybe talked about behind the scenes, stuff that I had even heard a little bit in the process of that. And it came via Kirk Herbstreit. Okay, so Kirk Herbstreit was on a podcast this week. I got to look up the name of the pod because I forgot it off the top of my head. The Boys Down South podcast, maybe something like that. And he was, somehow the conversation about Nico came up. Now, it's worth noting, the podcast actually came out last week. I looked into this, but this clip started going viral on Monday. Here is Kirk Herbstreit on what he knows about the Nico Iamaleava situation.
I don't know the true story. I've heard different stories. Some people thought it was about money. I've heard from close sources it was more about Nico's dad going to Josh back in December before they played Ohio State, like, hey, listen, you got to get better at offensive line and better at receiver. You got to get better around him if you want us to stick around, which blows my mind that a college quarterback's dad would do that to a head coach. And I think at the end of the day, when they got into spring ball, it was still more of you haven't brought people in to make him and this offense better. Again, I don't know if that's true, but that's what I was hearing. So I don't think it was necessarily about the money. I think it was more about, is Nico going to be able to play well enough to eventually be a first pick in the draft with the players that they had around him? That's disgusting to me if that's true.
That was Kirk Herbstreit on the Nico Iamaleava situation in the Try That in a Small Town podcast, which is certainly a nice metaphor for what went down in Knoxville, Tennessee. I think Nico and his dad found out the hard way about that one. What did the kids say? F around and find out. What is it? F-A something. F-A, let's see, Producer Matt. Producer Matt's going to bail me out here. F-A-F-O. Yeah, Nico and his dad, F-A-F-O. Try that in a small town. Perfect metaphor for the conversation. So let's go ahead and dive in because it does kind of give a new twist to this Nico Iamaleava situation. Okay. So let me say this. One, as far as the whole conversation about Nico wanting more help on the O-line, more help on the wide receiver group, that was something that I actually heard right around the time of the college football playoff. Now, I'll be honest, I heard it after the college football playoff. And it kind of makes sense, I guess, in hindsight. I didn't hear it before, but remember, Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler called the first game of the college football playoff for Tennessee, their only game in the college football playoff, Tennessee, Ohio State. And to the credit of Ohio State, they really did get after Nico pretty bad. I can be critical of Nico. He's not the reason they lost that game. Ohio State was just awesome, okay? But I did hear at that time that Nico's camp felt like they needed more help along the O-line. Nico's camp felt like they needed more help in the receiver room. We can agree, disagree, but that was a sentiment that if you kind of followed the story behind the scenes, you knew was the case. With that said, it doesn't make what unfolded from there, because I know what, by the way, I know what people are going to say. Everyone's going to say, oh, well, of course, every quarterback wants better wide receivers and better offensive line. Okay, I get that. It doesn't make what happened from there any less weird. It doesn't make Nico any more right, and it doesn't make Josh Heupel any more wrong. I still think Josh Heupel handled it perfectly. I still think Nico and his camp handled it terribly. So let's go ahead and just dive into some of the facts about all this, because first of all, I think what Herbstreit said is right. Whatever is going on behind the scenes, dad going to the coach, it's kind of lame, right? Doesn't it feel like middle school? Doesn't it feel like, my son, why isn't he playing shortstop? He's the best player. It's like, dude, shut up. This is, by the way, why you need a real agent. And I think Nico has since gotten one, but this was a conversation in April of like, this is what happens when you have your buddy and your dad handling things. There are professional ways to handle things. Nico and his camp did not. Beyond that, let me say this. If that was the argument, two things. One, it's idiotic. And two, it was handled, again, in the worst way possible. Because here's the bottom line. If the argument is Nico didn't have enough help, well, guess what? You know what Josh Heupel did? He went out and got him help in the offseason. If the argument is your O-line isn't good enough, well, guess what? The number one high school offensive tackle in all of high school football last year, you know who it was? A player by the name of David Sanders. Not sure if you heard of him. Tennessee fans have. You know why? Because he committed to Tennessee. So, we don't have enough help along the offensive line. They literally went out and got the number one offensive tackle in America. And history tells us a good offensive tackle can step in and play day one in college football. Caden Proctor did it at Alabama. Jordan Seaton did it at Colorado. And David Sanders is going to do it at Tennessee next year. By the way, talk about the wide receivers. Well, guess what? Mike Matthews was a 5-star 2 classes ago, and he is going to be a breakout star this year. I can promise you that. So there was help on the way. By the way, it is worth noting as well, some of the wide receivers that were on the team in 2022 before Nico took over, or 2023 when Nico took over, and then 2024 last year, regressed with Nico as a quarterback. Chris Braswell was better with Joe Milton as his quarterback than Nico Iamaleava. That is indisputable. So it's not all on the players. At some point, it's on the quarterback. But what it goes back to, again, to me, is that it was handled in about the worst manner possible. Because here's the bottom line. Listen, we can agree or disagree the state of college sports. Should players be able to transfer, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But the bottom line is it is justifiable if you're a quarterback to want help along the O-line and the wide receiver room. Now, Josh Heupel helped, but if the argument is he didn't, guess what? You don't wait until late April to whine about it. You don't whine about it before the playoff, by the way. You know what you do? You play the playoff game, you suck it up, and I know there's all sorts of reports that Nico, there was talk he wasn't even going to play in the playoff, whatever. But the bottom line is, you know what you do? You play in the playoff game, and if you don't think it's going to get better, guess what you do? You enter the portal in December, because that's the point where you actually have leverage. That's the point where teams actually need a quarterback. That is the point where you can say to Tennessee, if you don't go and get me help, I will go somewhere else. And he chose not to do that. By the way, it's not only the time when you're going to get the best opportunity to go somewhere else that is comparable to Tennessee, that is also the time that all the good wide receivers and offensive linemen are in the transfer portal. By June, by the spring portal, I mean, most guys don't enter the portal. If you're going to enter the portal, most guys enter in December. So if the argument is that you need more help, then December is the time that you have to not only vocalize that, but if you're going to take action, then you have to do it. Let me take it a third step further. If that is your issue, not enough talent around you, you know what else you do not do? You don't ask for more money and basically try to hold out, because ultimately, even if he wanted more help, at the end of the day, that was still the issue. Was Nico's camp, I don't want to blame it all on Nico, was basically like, we need more money or we're not coming back. And so it's like, do you need more money? By the way, you're making $2+ million a year. You weren't even that good. Tennessee made the college football playoff because of Dylan Sampson and the defense. And so if the argument is I need more money, well, doesn't that take away from the O-line? Doesn't that take away from the skill position guys that you need to succeed? Because it kind of feels like it does to me. So to me, what this story tells me is two things. Is one, like I said, I truly believe in my heart of hearts, this should teach every young, high-profile player a simple lesson. Get a real agent. Unless your dad's a lawyer, unless your dad negotiates, unless your mom negotiates for a living, I'm sure Nico's dad, in his heart of hearts, thought he was doing what was best for his son. But you don't know what you're doing. You don't have the leverage that you think. And I think he irrevocably potentially screwed up his son's career. I truly believe that. He took less money to go to UCLA in a higher tax state significantly. Believe me, I fill out tax forms every year in California. It ain't pretty, okay? Move to Nashville tomorrow if I could, if, wife's got a job here that she can't really leave. Anyway, another conversation for another day. He's paying a lot more in taxes, making less money on an inferior team. That's why if you had real representation, this would have never happened. Certainly not in the manner that it did. Maybe you enter the portal in December. Maybe you find a better landing spot. Two, I do believe this just proves that Tennessee, they're in a better spot without Nico than with him. By the way, producer Matt, you could pop up the Torres on Tennessee, Torres on the Vols Twitter page again, because if you're a Tennessee fan, that's where you need to be following Torres on the Vols for all your late-breaking Tennessee news. But to me, this speaks to Tennessee is going to be in a better situation. There it is right there. Torres on the Vols on Twitter. Tennessee is going to be in a better situation without Nico. They don't need the drama. He wasn't that good, and Tennessee fans know that. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but he wasn't that good. They didn't make the playoff because of him. Now, they didn't make the playoff despite him. I don't want to just bash the kid because he wasn't terrible, but Josh Heupel didn't trust him. Dylan Sampson was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. The defense was elite. I think we looked it up. I think it was 9 categories. They were top 25 in the country. And yeah, Tennessee's going to be better without him. We don't know what we're going to get from Joey Aguilar, but this is not the drama you need in the locker room. You got 84 other guys that are all pulling in the same direction. This guy's making it about himself. Tennessee is going to be just fine. Tennessee football was great before Nico Iamaleava. They're going to be pretty good this year, I think, and they're going to be great after. Thank you to the Try That in a Small Town podcast, because Nico Iamaleava and his family effed around and found out. Producer Matt, any other questions before we get out of here? I don't know if there's much else in the chat. If there is not, it's okay. Should mention, by the way, a little bit but do I do another WNBA rant? ESPN put out a bogus PR piece today, basically talking about how great the ratings were. It was down 33% from last year. We talked about the WNBA on the last show, so I figured put a button on it. Sad news, just saw the Ozzy Osbourne stuff right before we went on air. Obviously, we all watched the Osbournes, Malcolm Jamal Warner. I know a lot of you, we talk about other stuff here, but a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, but we talked plenty of sports. All right, tell you what, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Before we do want to go ahead and, I think I did say John Summerall's name wrong. I apologize about that. What else? Let's see here. I did see something else I wanted to talk about. I do. Yeah, this is interesting. He said, Joe says, interesting mix of Tennessee and Kentucky topics. Yeah, not many shows can get away with that without a war in the chat. But I'll tell you what, I do think we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Midweek show felt like there was a lot. Do me a favor. If you are not subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel, do me a quick favor. Please make sure to do so. Really do appreciate, like I said, the support of this audience. It's the middle of the summer. We have not had a college sports game, unless college baseball, unless you're including that, since Since the first week of April. Numbers have continued to grow. Viewership continues to grow. All of that. We're trending to be in better shape this year than last year as far as analytics are concerned for July of 2025 over 2024. So we appreciate your support. If you're not subscribed, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, please make sure to do so. Make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead and give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that. Make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com. All for today's show. By the way, if nothing else happens, we might do another mailbag on Friday. So send all your questions, Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com. We will get to those on Friday. Time for me to go. Appreciate your support. And I do think, Thursday. We'll do a show Thursday. We'll get out of here on that. Shout out to Torrin Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head. By the way, shout out to my internet because I thought it was going to go out like last episode. Joe says, love ya, Torres. Great show. Joe, I love you guys, you audience. I appreciate everybody's support. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. Thursday night, we'll be back. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe Signetti will do something else crazy we got to talk about.